Like a lot of people, I was shaken this week by the death of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk for the crime of saying things that some people didn't like. Political violence has been growing over the last decade, but there's something about this that feels different. When politicians are killed, it almost feels like an unavoidable tragedy. There are always going to be psychopaths and murderers, and targeting people who wield actual political power to enact laws almost makes some kind of sixth sense. But Charlie Kirk had no political power beyond his ability to influence the dialogue, and his death has sent a shockwave through the political community that feels like we've crossed an invisible line. Charlie Kirk was killed because he couldn't be proven wrong. And I wish I could say that this was some lone political extremist, a psychopath whose views would be abhorrent to most normal people. But I'm sad to say that the response to Charlie's death in mainstream discourse has acted as my personal catalyst, born of some combination of fear and confusion that I have to start speaking up. You see, I work in the tech industry. It's long had a left-wing bias, and as a libertarian who doesn't identify entirely with the left or the right, I learned years ago that expressing viewpoints that fit into a left-wing worldview is acceptable, while anything remotely critical of left-wing ideas or in support of the right is considered stupid or evil. I can count on one hand the number of people I've met in the last decade who openly support Trump, and most will discuss this only in hushed tones. I've generally fallen into this same trap. For fear of ostracization, or worse, being targeted as a racist or a homophobe, I've kept quiet, thinking that political disagreement is not worth harming my career. But this last week, I've been horrified. Dozens of people in my professional circle have expressed support for the murder of Charlie Kirk, or have pointed to his words as examples of why consequences are deserved. The world-shaking reality that I have come face to face with is that a huge number of the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis would probably celebrate if I were assassinated tomorrow. I am not a Christian nor a conservative, but I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in freedom of speech. I'm worried about extremism in the trans movement that targets children, and while I consider myself pro-choice, the mainstream left-wing opinion that abortion has no moral ramifications at all is clearly absurd. These are not extreme beliefs, yet these are exactly the beliefs that I partly share with Charlie that are pointed to by people I once considered friends in justifying or excusing his death. How can you go back to just working alongside people knowing this? And so this video represents my stepping out of the shadows. Charlie spoke often of the importance of talking to each other to prevent dehumanization and the normalization of violence. I'm sad to say that I've been a coward until now, contributing to that lack of conversation by keeping my head down. This is something that I will no longer do. I will never condone political violence or using threats to shut down discussion. We are at a point in history where violence is going to escalate if we don't take action, and that requires people like me, and perhaps you, to stand up to the bullies and extremists who would make us feel like we can't express our views. We have to remind them that our beliefs are not fringe, that we're all around them, silently afraid to speak up. Because the successful left-wing campaign to conflate right-wing views with fascism has created an echo chamber in mainstream discourse, the kind that leads the left to believe that they are morally superior, and their hollow, untested ideas never had to face the proper intellectual scrutiny. And clearly, with the death of Charlie Kirk, we have seen that this can ferment into hatred of a perceived extremist fringe that erupts as violence. Charlie was not an extremist. He was the best example you could ask for of a moderate conservative who used words instead of violence and bravely stood in front of jeering crowds because he knew the discussion was more important than his perception. And he was killed because enough people in the mainstream of political discussion called him a fascist. They did this often enough that someone decided to take action. The sort of action that might actually be justified if not for the fact that this accusation was entirely fabricated. And so regular people like you and I now have a duty to stand up and show the extreme left that Charlie represents millions of regular people who are done keeping our heads down. We are here to fight like hell in the marketplace of ideas, to prove once and for all that the extreme ideology of woke leftism, which has become the mainstream of left-wing politics, is something we will no longer stand for. We're here to win the war of ideas and prevent the war of weapons. We're here to honor Charlie's message. The silent right are done hiding, because we understand that this assassination was an attack on all of us, and you cannot kill us all.